Welcome to another edition of More to the Story. This is a series on identity and representation brought to you by Anchor, which is a Spotify company. I am your host, Xavier Jernigan. Everybody calls me X. What up, everybody? I know you're out there live in YouTube, and we're so excited to see you. As we always do, as we kick these off, I'm in Brooklyn, New York right now. Holla at me in the chat. Let me know where you're joining us from so we can shout you out. But we are so glad that you are here. And we're just having these powerful conversations about what it means to reflect you and your voice through podcasting, through different mediums. And we love having these really engaging, transparent conversations about that, because these are conversations that need to be had. So many of you are having these conversations on the podcast that you're creating on Anchor, and you're going to learn and listen about how we do that ourselves. I host Spotify's morning show called The Get Up. It's live every day, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern. So tap in if you don't already. If you're not, I don't know why you're not, but you need to get down. We help you get your morning started with a bit of joy. We talk and we debate about what's going on in pop culture, what's going on across the world. We give you your headlines, and then you get music that's personalized just for you. And you can hear me there every single weekday. But I'm just really excited because we have some dope guests lined up for you, because we don't play around. More to the story. This is Anchor. This is Spotify. So you know how we do it. So Anchor creators are diverse in every sense of the word, like from their voices and their backgrounds, where they're from. That's why we like to shout that out, to the kinds of stories they tell. And for this series, we're going to continue to empower creators to shine a light on their own unique experiences and those that don't always receive the attention they deserve. I'm one that believes in giving people their flowers while they are here to receive them. And it's just power in having a platform where we can elevate these stories and these voices. And by doing that, we promote inclusivity through these open conversations, through that transparency. So each of these events, we feature a new storyteller in partnership with best in class nonprofits. And I'm going to guide us through those conversations. And I'm just excited, man, because we got a couple of heavy hitters for you today. And I'm really excited to bring them on. So we're going to bring them in and let's get it going. And I do want to say this. We are in June now, but we just came out of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And just because the month of May ended, doesn't mean we stop these conversations that need to be had. People still need to be seen. These stories need to be highlighted and spotlighted. So that's going to be our theme for today. And because we have these resources out there that we want to highlight, and we got a dope show that one of our guests hosts that we want to talk about too. But I want to introduce our first guest. And our first guest is Jose Antonio Vargas. Jose, what's up, man?
Thank you for having me. Or since, I'm Filipino, it's Pepeton. That's literally my nickname in Tagalog.
Say it one more time.
Pepeton. I know.
Pepeton.
Really,
I like that.
Pepeton.
Pepeton.
Jose, Pepe, Antonio, Ton, Pepeton.
I like that.
Yep.
Yeah, man. Let's keep it. I love that. Now, let me give you your proper introduction, because I'm sitting with a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. Yeah, come on, man. You won the Pulitzer Prize. That is nothing to skip over. You're Emmy-nominated filmmaker and Tony-nominated producer, a leading voice for the human rights of immigrants. You founded the nonprofit media advocacy organization, Unifying American. There you go. Yes. Unifying American, named one of the world's most innovative companies by Fast Company. That is no small feat. And in 2020, Fortune named you one of its 40 under 40 most influential people in government and politics. And I know it's hard to make any 40 under 40 list, especially by Fortune. And your best-selling memoir, Dear America, Notes of an Undocumented Citizen, was published by HarperCollins back in 2018. And your second book, and I love this title, White is Not a Country, will be published by Pantheon Books in 2 years. So that's coming in 2023. Please give it up for Jose Antonio Pepeton Vargas. What's up, brother?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be a part of this. And I was just kind of, telling llmind that like my nephews are a big fan. So I'm now the cool uncle because I'm doing this with you. So thank you for that. Salamat.
And not because you have a Pulitzer Prize or you're Emmy
they don't care about
nominated.
they don't care about any of that.
They don't care about none of that.
I'm undocumented. I just need papers. I don't need awards. Full documents. You know what I mean? So,
yes.
Yeah.
He's like, I just need to get documented, and that's it with llmind, and I'm all good. And that brings up our second guest that's with us today. llmind is a multi-platinum and Grammy-winning producer who has worked with. Let me just name a few. If you don't know who llmind is, that's okay, but I am letting you know you're a little bit behind, so you got to catch up. We're gonna put you on right now. Drake, J. Cole, Yeezy, the Carters, Jay-Z, and Beyonce, Lil Uzi Vert, Future, and many, many others. He worked extensively with Lin-Manuel Miranda on a Hamilton soundtrack and produced the outro credits to Disney's Moana. He's passionate and dedicated to producer education, a tenant of his show with Spotify, and pre-COVID toured his BLAP sessions. And we're going to talk about what BLAP means in just a couple of minutes, but his BLAP sessions extensively, both domestically and internationally, because this man is globally known. He's worldwide. Give it up for llmind. What's up, brother?
Man, I appreciate you guys so much. Shout out to Jose. It's an honor to do this with you, man. My honorary Filipino. It's always good seeing, our people's coming together and we're out here doing these amazing things, and it just feels really good, dude. So really appreciate the love, and what a great intro, man. I didn't think I was that big of a deal, but it sounds like a few things have happened that I'm proud of. So.
Yo, check it. When they told me, in all seriousness, they put me on to Jose, and they told me llmind was coming through, and I was really excited about it. You have a music and talk show right here on Spotify, and that joint is dope, man. Can you tell us about that real quick?
Thank you. Yeah. So I have a podcast called llmind Put the Loop On, and it actually evolved from a podcast that I started back in 2011 called BLAP on the Radio. And I wanted to, I've always just wanted to create a podcast where I can have these really candid, unscripted conversations with successful people, right? Whether it's other music producers that are successful, or even other people in other industries that have done really amazing things. And, it's still a relatively new show, but I've had some great guests. I've had my man Jay White, who produced, all of Cardi B's big hits, all the way down to another fellow Filipino, Joe Coy, the ultimate funny man of the universe, Joe Coy, and even some guests. This guy Danny Maygard, who is a big player in the non-fungible token Bitcoin NFT world, sort of picked his brain on that. So it's just an opportunity to just like chop it up with other really amazing, creative, successful entrepreneurs in hopes to inspire other people to, do what they want to do as well.
I love it, man. So tap into that if you haven't already. And guys, just in general, I want to start it off with this. What stories relating to Asian American and Pacific Islander experiences and identities have been ignored or overlooked in entertainment, and especially in the podcasting world?
Do you want to kick that off?
Either one can jump in. Yeah, either one can jump in.
No, please, no, please go ahead. Don't mind. Well, I mean,
okay,
I just think.
I think for me, in the industry that I'm in, being Filipino, just being Asian, and being, a hip hop producer primarily, there's not too many of us. And so it's sort of, in my experience, it's been sort of a double-edged sword, right? It's like, when I first got on the scene many years ago, there weren't too many hip hop producers that looked like me. So it was, there's this Asian kid who's like making these hard, hip hop beats. And, it put a lot more pressure on what I did, and being able to just like convince people that I was the real deal. And so it was definitely a double-edged sword, because part of it was convincing people that I was passionate and was the real deal. And then part of it too was the good part about it was that people just always remembered me, right? It's like, oh, that's the Asian kid who does the beats.
Right.
And so, very, very hard to forget. And so, it worked both ways. And being someone who is just grew up on hip hop, is such a big fan of hip hop. I just always wanted to be that musician who came into this culture and tried to contribute to it as much as I can, and pay respect to the pioneers and the people who started. I mean, to the culture. I mean, hip hop culture. This is Black culture. This is the Bronx. This is New York. This is, you know what I mean? And being from New Jersey, and Xavier, I know you know this too, being in Brooklyn, it's like, that's the epicenter of this. And so I just always want to come in here and contribute to it where I can, when I can, while at the same time paying homage to the people that came before us.
I think that's so important to like, you got to bring your own contributions to it, but still like, still remember, like, this is where it came from, but you have a right to create your own space within that and not necessarily apologize for that. And there's a way to do it. And I think that's something that I personally admire about what you've contributed to the game. Cause I know you've been putting in work for like couple of decades now, you know what I mean? Like, I've seen your name in credits for, years and years. So I really respect that about how you've contributed. Jose, I want you to chime in on that one. Like, what stories haven't been lifted up enough or at all?
Well, I think, Filipinos are kind of tricky, right? Because like llmind's first name is Ramon. My name is Jose. Right. And we look like, and so, I grew up in the Bay Area. In California, you can't swing a purse without hitting someone who's Filipino. There's so many Filipinos here, right? Right. And then when I moved to DC to work at the Washington Post, like in 2004, I was so confusing to all the white people and the Black people. They're like, why do you look like that? Why is your name Jose? Like, I had to literally explain to them, there's 100 million Filipinos. Filipinos have been here before there was a United States of America. Like the first Filipinos,
talk about it.
Were sighted in what's now California in 1587.
Wow.
I don't know if people know this. Like,
I don't think people do. Jose, I don't think people do.
Filipinos were here before, like, pretty much before anybody was here.
Wow.
Right? And build a real relationship with Native Americans, with like indigenous people who owned this land before they became, quote unquote, Native Americans.
Talk about it.
So I think there's just a lack of understanding and constant erasure of Filipino identity and where it fits in the Asian American identity.
Yes.
And I get a little sensitive about it because I feel like, this reckoning that we're going through right now with AAPI people, right? I bet you most people don't even really know what AAPI is.
Oh, I agree.
I have some relatives who are like, hey, are we Asian or are we Pacific Islander? Like, there's all these questions around identity that I think for the first time I'm really grappling with, but we can't grapple with it until, right behind me is Toni Morrison, who's like one of the most influential people in my life. And she was the one that taught me when I was a kid, reading her books, that I had to stop thinking of myself as a minority.
Yes. I always hated that term too.
As a marginalized, like, we Filipinos are actually the center of our own lives.
That's right.
So, but that's why I think what llmind has done, right? It's like, you're totally right. Like, how do we honor like hip hop that has come from Black people and bring our own kind of, Tagalog, like our own kare-kare and palabok and our own kind of taste of it, right?
That's right.
And I think that's something that llmind has been able to really pioneer and do, that I think in some ways he has created really a space for other Filipino and Filipina artists and musicians and creators, including my own nephew, who's going to be a producer, Angelo, like, to kind of claim that space and do it unapologetically, but respectfully. Right.
Jose, I want to stay with you on that, because you touched on a lot of things that connect to the name of your organization, Unifying American.
Yeah.
And clearly this was a lot of this energy was the catalyst to why you founded the organization back in 2011. But I want you to tell me a bit about why and why, how, and what.
Well, I mean, I really started the organization with three of my friends because I was, this is June, it's Immigrant Heritage Month, and it's also Pride Month, right?
That's right.
So I had come out as gay when I was in high school because I found out that I was here illegally, that my grandparents basically smuggled me here. And then
Wow.
their solution was to marry me to a woman. And because, that's what people do, right? You just
Right.
find some US citizen, you marry. And so basically I told my lolo, grandfather in Tagalog, that I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm gay.
Mm.
And so to like out yourself to this machismo guy,
Yeah.
God bless his soul, who, his idea of America was Frank Sinatra's My Way. So I basically was like, I'm not going to go through your plan. Instead, I'm gay. And then 12 years later, after coming out as gay, I decided, against the advice of like 27 lawyers, to come out as undocumented.
Wow.
Like, to basically say to the government, I'm here illegally, like 11 other million people, right? And this is
Right.
not only an issue that impacts Latinos and Latinas, and specifically Mexican community. I actually think we owe Mexican people an apology for having racialized this issue as much as we have.
Absolutely.
Undocumented Black people,
Yes.
undocumented Caribbean, undocumented Asian.
Yes.
1 out of 7 Koreans in this country is undocumented, right? So our goal at Define American is, how do we humanize this issue of immigration, and how do we explain that there are 11 million undocumented people here, but you can't talk about them without talking about all 45 million immigrants, right?
Right.
Because the reality is we all are in the same households. So this question of how do you define American is fundamental. And I would argue too that you can't ask that question without talking about African Americans, and how African Americans who are descendants of slaves are not immigrants. It was not their choice to come here.
That's right.
And Native Americans, right? So it's complex. And honestly, as someone who's a journalist and a filmmaker, I feel that if our politics are so unable to embrace complexity, then the only way that we have to do it is through stories.
That's right.
Because stories are all about nuance and complexity. That's where it has to live, right? So that's what we do.
I love that. And what you touched on there, and llmind, you touched on this when you talked about the culture and hip hop culture, is intersectionality, right? So we just came out of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Now we're in Pride. Happy Pride. So now we're in Pride. It's also Black Music Month. Last month was also Mental Health Awareness Month. All of these weave together and tie together. No one is just one thing. We're all in community together. So I love that, you're essentially challenging the status quo when you say define American. You're like, no. We're going to define this a different way, because this is what it really is. It's not just being white, male, and straight. And that's what I love. Just like hip hop isn't just being like Black in New York, right? Hip hop is also what llmind is doing. llmind is from New Jersey. llmind is Filipino. You know what I mean? And that's just, it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. llmind, I want to go back to you. And you referenced BLAP a minute ago, but I want you to talk about what the acronym stands for and why you created that and use that as like the basis of part of your platform and part of your storytelling.
Yeah, so BLAP is actually a word that originated from San Francisco, and it's a slang word for what they call like beats. They would call beats BLAPs. And so years ago, I kind of took the word and I created an acronym from it, and it's basically BLAP, which stands for Belief, Love, Action, Positivity. And with those 4 words, to me, I feel like are like the perfect blueprint to really everything and anything that you want to accomplish, right? In life, in your career, just in anything in general. And so, having belief in what you do and what you want to envision for the world, right? Injecting love into what you do and who you interact with. Taking action is just self-explanatory. Without action, there is no result.
Right.
And then love, right? Love, which is the most important thing, or I'm sorry, positivity is just being positive about the result and having faith that whatever it is that you're doing will happen and will sort of, manifest in the future. So that's kind of the acronym. And from there, a lot of different ideas were born from doing these like producer get-togethers that I've been doing in the past few years, to creating these, drum kits and tools for other producers, creating this economy for them. And it's kind of like the lifeblood of everything that I do. So I'm really, I draw inspiration from that word with everything that I do.
I want to delve more into the storytelling aspect of the work that both of you do. llmind, talk about how you decide like who comes on your show, who you want to interview, what do you look for in deciding on the guests that you want to share those stories and engage with. We'll come back to llmind in a second when he gets back. Yeah. Jose, I want to ask you the same question. Like, obviously you work extensively with news, television, and film.
Yep.
I want to talk about how you decide which medium that you're going to use. How do you use it? And how do you decide which stories to tell?
Yeah. So, I mean, our job is how do we humanize kind of immigrant stories and change narrative. So narrative is like a system, right? Like the fact that we always assume that immigration is about Latinas and Latinos is so embedded in our psyche that it's not going to take one story. It's going to take CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, the local television news,
podcasts.
It's gonna take watching a show like Superstore, where you see an undocumented gay Filipino character, or the fact that right now I don't think there's a single undocumented Black character in any TV show.
You're absolutely right. I can't think of one at least.
I can't think of one. When in reality, undocumented Black immigrants, because of systematic racism and the structures in this country, actually face higher deportation rates, right? And so true. For us, like, it's not enough that we exist in one medium. It's important that we exist across mediums.
Right.
So we have a journalism strategy, we have a Hollywood entertainment strategy, and I mean, everybody that watches YouTube, I watch a lot of YouTube, and I didn't really quite realize how, in many ways, how organized the anti-immigrant circles have been on like taking over YouTube. So when you type immigration, the most watched videos you see are all these white supremacist anti-immigrant tropes. That's sad. No one is going up against them.
Right.
So at Unifying American, we're actually crafting a strategy to figure out how do we make sure that on YouTube, which is really popular among all my nieces and nephews, that you can't just binge watch a white supremacist anti-immigrant ideology all weekend.
Right.
So our strategy is very layered in that way, in the same way that now, I don't know about you, but I just finished Barry Jenkins, just an incredible filmmaker.
Brilliant.
I just finished Barry Jenkins' Underground Railroad. And
I haven't watched yet. It's on my list.
God. Okay, you gotta watch it.
Top of my list, Amazon Prime.
Yeah, watch it, but like don't watch all of it. Like just like it takes time to kind of
I believe it. Yeah, you got to take it in bit by bit.
But I watched that, and I haven't told Barry this, but like I watched it and I'm thinking, this is not just TV. Right? Like the fact that like people think of that as just quote unquote TV, right? Or I just think what's exciting about what's happening right now is I actually think we are redefining the limitations and the boundaries of what storytelling is.
I agree.
And I think that's so exciting. And now the question I ask myself as somebody who kind of, I theater, film, TV, books, right? I ask myself, like, what is the best way to tell that story or to make that argument? Is it a book? Is it a podcast? Is it a TV series? Is it scripted? Is it documentary? Is it theater? Is it a piece of theater?
How do you make that decision? Because you've been so adept. That's the thing. Like you've been adept across all of them.
I don't know about that, dude. I feel like
I think so.
I feel like I'm in elementary school, and thankfully, I just turned 40, and thank God Asian people age well.
What up?
What they say? Black don't crack.
Black don't
Asian
crack.
Don't raisin.
That's right.
Asian don't raisin, right? So because I'm not usually an envious person, but I'm envious of like my nieces and nephews because they're entering a world that is in flux.
Yeah.
And so And that's why this idea of how do we make sure, and this is something Toni Morrison taught me when I was a kid, how do we make sure that we create our own narratives, that
Yes.
we, that we are in charge of our own master narrative, that we're not letting people define us for us.
Right.
And I think if I were to say like what is a unifying theme across all mediums is that white is no longer the default, right? Like we're not the idea of what's mainstream. There's like there are 1.7 million Filipinos in California. Wow. There are more Filipinos in California than there are people in New Hampshire, Delaware, and Rhode Island.
Wow.
So I am not your minority. Like I am, in many ways, I've always felt that, like, again, it's Pride Month, right? In a way, I've always felt like gay people have to be explained to straight people, but in reality, I need straight people to explain themselves to me. Ooh. Like I need to understand. Do you know what I mean? Like
that's real.
I'm gay every day. I'm Asian every day. I'm Filipino every day, right? Like I don't need a month, but thank you. And by the way, why is Black History Month the shortest month of the year?
Exactly.
Like what is that about?
Exactly.
Like what is that about?
Exactly. Clearly the shortest month. But to your point, there's intentionality behind all these things. Narrative is like, even narrative in and of itself is a construct and a tool that's used against us to drive these stereotypes and paint us a certain way. And that's why it's so important to have all these different mediums. I think we're in a golden age of storytelling. And you're doing a beautiful job of painting across all of those different canvases. llmind, you're doing it with your music and talk show. And llmind, I wanted to go back to you and just talk about, if we get him back, and if we got you back, llmind, if you can hear me, let me know. But I want to go back to, how you decide what guests to bring on your show and what narratives and stories to highlight.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Let me see if I can walk over here.
Okay.
This entire neighborhood has literally no service.
No, sorry. We can hear you right now, though.
We can hear you right now.
Yeah.
Okay,
so if
good.
you want to go ahead, go ahead and keep chopping.
Okay,
it
cool.
Up.
So to answer the question, so the types of narrative. First of all, I just want to say, Jose, you are crushing it. Like everything you're saying, you're saying is like so relatable, and what you do is so important, man. Like you're a goat, man. You're a legend for that. Seriously. So to answer your question, basically, like the narratives that I try to portray and try to tell on my podcast, and just really in everything that I do, is just this idea of becoming something. I know this might sound cliche, but this idea of like becoming what you weren't supposed to become, right? Ooh. Like being Filipino.
Yeah.
Me, Jose knows this. We're technically supposed to be, nurses and doctors, and there's nothing obviously wrong with that. That's amazing, and that's part of what we do. But my parents are from the Philippines, and when I told them I wanted to be a producer, they were like, "What is that? Like what? Like I don't even know what that is, right?" And so having that initial support from my parents was difficult at first, and so being Filipino, being Asian, and pursuing the career that I pursued, definitely something that you don't normally see. And so, all these lessons that I've learned over the years and all these things that I'm still learning to this day, I always want to sort of, I think that's a very powerful and important conversation to have, and very powerful, important story to tell, is this idea of like becoming the thing that you weren't supposed to become. And how can you achieve that? How can you achieve that? And I've been lucky enough to be one of the few that is currently doing that, and I'm very proud of that, and I want to tell that story more through the lens of other people that have been able to do that as well.
llmind, I love that. One thing I was having this thought maybe a week or so ago, right? And I'm a Black man, and I host Spotify's morning show, right? So every day, we have a really big audience, very thankful for that. And these people are tuning in and essentially starting their day with my voice, right? And I'm talking about my little quirks and how I brush my teeth and, all this stuff and my takes on what's going on in pop culture. And on that note, like some people wouldn't think like, right, a straight Black dude, I'm from Florida, right? I'm from the beach, lived in Brooklyn for a long time, but hey, I like Sex in the City, right? They wouldn't expect that, right? But I also grew up on a different world and Spike Lee and John Singleton, or that I'll be like this movie buff, you know what I'm saying? And it's just like me being able to represent that and just be, myself unapologetically each and every day pushes the narrative and changes it, because it's like, I don't got to say, hey, every day I'm Black, I'm Black, I'm Black, I'm Black. I don't hide from that, of course. But the fact that I just get to be me every single day, that in and of itself is being something I wasn't supposed to come based on the narratives that have been traditionally pushed out in terms of who Black men are and what Black people are supposed to sound like. So just having a platform to do that is such a blessing, and that I get to represent that each and every day. And that, to me, that in and of itself is progress. Jose, you talked about your nephews, they're able to like shape themselves and, and in community and with their, people like you, their uncle, in this world that's in flux right now. But we're getting to do that too, like at a key point, in our lives, right? So I think it's just cool how it's like coming around full circle, and we have these mediums in this golden age of storytelling to say, no, it looks different. Jose, you said no to your grandfather. You're like, nope, I'm not signing up for that. Sorry, not doing it. And I think it's really important.
And I just want to say too, like, Jose, your story about, just overcoming the people that just like, for whatever reason, just like, doubting you and what you're doing, and coming out as being, being a gay Filipino age, like you've overcome so many things, and like that's so inspiring, dude. It's like
it really is,
man. And like, I'm really, really inspired by your story, man. Like it's like all the odds are against you, yet you've still been able to do all these amazing things. Like that's going to inspire people for generations. So like, you're like I said, man, you're a GOAT, man. So
Jose, seriously, man, seriously, dude, this is real. This is real.
I guess what I want to say to that, and thank you, salamat for that, is this is where I find history really therapeutic, right? Like I find, and this is why I think history is so important, because when I was a kid, in the same way, llmind, I mean, I gotta tell you this. So my nephew Angelo, right? He's a producer. He's already making beats and all that. His parents were like, okay, he's gonna be a producer, but they're thinking he needs to go to college. He needs to get the mom's a dentist. My cousin was like my sister, and then because I am a writer, right, and a filmmaker, I can tell my cousins, yo, Angelo can actually be a producer. Right. He can be an artist. Yes. And you point to people like llmind. You say, look,
there's a path.
There's a path. And so in that same way, when I was a kid, I was undocumented, I was gay. I'm a documented gay Filipino, and I had to understand what that was. And since there was any literature around that, if I hadn't read Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin when I was 16, if literature written by Black people wasn't available, I would not have had vocabulary or language to even put the question mark and define American.
Yeah.
Because to me, that is the most provocative part of it.
Yeah.
In many ways, that's the question mark the Black people have been asking since they got to this country.
Yes.
Right? Saying, wait a second, you say you're that, but wait, you do this.
Right.
So I think that's where what you're saying, X, about how I'm hoping that I'm glad that people are more open about our identities, that we can own the identities.
Yeah.
But then what are we doing to really make sure that the bridges are being built? Like, like in this book that I'm working on right now, it's really scaring the shit out of me. Oh, sorry, I just cussed.
No, that's all good.
It's scaring me because part of what I'm researching is anti-Blackness in Asian communities and Latino communities.
Yeah.
How in many ways part of colonialism and imperialism, right?
That's right.
Is this idea that white is here and Black is here.
That's right.
Right. And then we get to this country, and thankfully Filipinos are interesting because among all the Asian groups, I think we're the group that tend to gravitate towards Black culture.
That's
I don't
true.
know what that is about. I don't know what that is about.
Yeah, that's been my experience for sure.
On that,
big
right?
facts, big facts, big facts.
Why is that?
Yep.
Illmind, why do you think that is? Bakit
I mean, you know, it could have to do with the fact that I don't know. I think as Filipino, we love pop culture. We love artistic things, and all you know, obviously all Asian cultures do. But I think something about just being Filipino. I don't know. There's a swag to it. You know, I don't know. I can't really explain it.
Again, this book that I'm researching, this guy named David Fagan. I don't know. Do you know about this guy, X?
I know that name.
Yeah. So African-American soldier, right? Went to the Philippines during the Philippine-American War.
Yep.
Realized that the white soldiers were calling the Filipinos Oriental N-words.
Yes.
Defected from the U.S. Army to fight with the Filipinos against the white Americans.
That's right.
Right? This
Amazing.
is like, so
powerful.
It's a fascinating story.
Right. This is powerful.
But that's the kind of story that tells us that there's a history of Filipino and Black solidarity. But that's not a history that's in history books, right? So I think in some ways that is what we have to work towards, is how do we make sure that as we talk about Asian identity and Black identity, and I don't even know what white is. I mean, that's why I'm writing a book called White is Not a Country, because I really don't know what white is, right? So as we do all of that, how do we build bridges so that we can actually see people as human beings and not as caricatures and not as stereotypes, which is really a lazy person's way of seeing someone who's not them, right? Like, how do we not do that?
And you know what? Because you know what happens? I notice it's something about human nature. It's the ugly side of human nature, is that when we don't fully understand something, and particularly someone, we tend to fill in the blanks. And we tend to fill in the blanks with negative tropes. It's something about human nature that does that really frustrates me. I got a question from the audience that I want to ask both of you. I think both of you can take this on. Shout out to Tyrone. We see you, brother. We appreciate it. How do you get someone to do an interview on your podcast or your show? Any of the mediums you work in, Jose, any of the mediums you work in and work with llmind, you know, especially as a producer, you work, you know, with a lot of different artists, especially if you don't know them so well. What's a good strategy for reaching out?
I guess I'll go first. So, well, in terms of my podcast, you know, I think honestly, the deeper question would be, you know, why I think there's way bigger goals, honestly, to be honest with you, out there than to just like be on my podcast. You know what I mean? Like, okay, what does it mean to be on my podcast? Well, we can have a conversation, but you know, ultimately, I think the question is, what is it you're looking for, right? Like, ask yourself, like, what do you want to happen ultimately, right? And so I think, you know, at the end of the day, like, we can get you on a podcast and we can have a conversation, but will that really like help you? Will that is that like the right solution for whatever it is you're trying to accomplish right now? And so I think that's probably the better question is, you know, what is it that you're looking to accomplish?
That's a really good point. And for me, and this is where I think being a journalist, I've been a journalist since I was like 17, and that's a long time. And what I loved about it from the very beginning was I was paid to be curious about other people. Right. And like, so like, I'm always amazed when people reach out to me for interviews and they haven't read up on anything. I'm like, yo, wait a second.
Oh man.
Why do you want to talk to me if you don't even, like,
yes.
You know, literally somebody was like, hey, are you still here in the country? And I'm like, yes, I'm still in the country. Like, you know, and I'm like, so if you're going to interview somebody, I think showing interest and curiosity, I think is really important. I actually think again, talk about YouTube, right? For some reason, I love watching, again, I make a lot of different content, right? And I was watching this video, and Jane Fonda, who I didn't really know that much, said something that was fascinating to me. She said, it's much more important to be interested than be interesting.
Ooh, I like that.
Let me repeat this.
I like
It
that.
is much more important to be interested than be interesting. And in this time when I feel like, and this is what I tell my nieces and nephews a lot, like, whatever you're posting on social media, please make sure that you're like posting it for yourself and not for other people, right? Like, meaning there's a lot of just performance happening. And I think part of the performance is this feeling that you have to be interesting to other people. And so therefore you don't have to be interested about other people.
Yeah.
So I think that's for me, like that is like very fundamental in what I do. I am infinitely curious about people and about human behavior, right? And I think in many ways, my storytelling is informed by that, right? Like I'm interested in not just what connects us, but like what happens. Like when I was writing my first book, which is all about being undocumented, the question I was asking myself was, what happens when a society says you're not a part of it? Right? So what walls do you end up building against other people? Like that kind of severance, right? And again, this is something that Black people know very much about.
Yeah.
When society says, oh, not for you, but for others, right? So those are the questions to me, the questions that in this book that I'm working on now, it's the construction of whiteness. So how did Germans and Irish and Italians and all these people with their different language and different cultures, how did they get here and melted and just got to be white?
Right.
And do they keep pushing the melting pot thing, thinking that all these other immigrants who are not European white people are all of a sudden gonna melt onto whiteness? And given that whitening creams are so, as llmind knows, whitening creams are incredibly popular among Koreans, Filipinos, right? And clearly among Latinos and Latinas too. Like,
and it's happening in the Black community as well.
Right. What is
bleaching
that
creams
about?
Yeah.
Like I remember when Braxton Family Values, I'm just throwing Braxton Family Values.
No, go. Yeah, please.
When Braxton Family Values first came out, what's a decade ago now? I'm like, this is a way more interesting version than the Kardashians, right? Because you were literally seeing colorism at work. It was a Chekhov. Right. Literally watching Chekhov. I'm like, what is this?
That's right.
And how, in many ways, because we have been so focused on white people, we're not looking at whiteness as ideology and how it permeates people who are not quote unquote white. So that's what I'm investigating, and it's a little scary, but I find it to be really, again, curious, right? I'm really curious about it.
I love Jose. Really I love that word curious. I love that you said that, because to me, I feel like curiosity is like the entry point to greatness, right? Like, yes, we're everything that we do is started with the curiosity, and I love that.
I totally agree. And I think when you're having a conversation, when you do have a guest on, like, so they agree, you do your research, you have to be an active listener, and you got to pay attention to what they're saying. Maybe you need to come off the page a little bit if you have your pre-prepared questions, and really engage in the conversation, engage in what the guest is giving you, and just make sure that you're read up enough on who you have in front of you so you can actually have that conversation. I think you'll get much more rich conversation out of that, rather than these talking points that you've prepared on your own that you want to get out of the person. That now you can, it's really about being interested in the person and what they're about, and letting whatever happens happen, right?
It also helps when you're friends with the guest.
Absolutely. Yes.
And that's kind of like what my podcast is like sort of turning into, is like just like, hey dude, let's, like, that conversation we had over drinks last night, like let's do it, let's here, record it. Yeah, let's record and do it again, but like, let's record it, and that's kind of the what I enjoy the most. So, but you're absolutely right.
llmind, I want to ask you this. Jose's talked about his nieces and nephews. I have 3 nephews. I have a nephew that was born my third nephew was born just now 4 weeks ago. He's 4 weeks old as of Tuesday. And llmind, you became a father this year. How has that new life experience influenced your creative process, your worldview, and how you're going to approach, what you do every day?
Yeah, it's been incredible. It's
And congrats, by the way.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much. So yeah, we had a daughter. Her name's Everest.
Great
Everest
name.
Ibanga. Yeah, thank you. She's my world. I this is my first time being away from her since she was born.
Wow.
And I missed her when I was on a plane. So she's home with my wife and the nanny, holding it down. But it's been a trip. She's my world, and I want to just continue to help prepare her for the world in the best way that we can as parents, and try to nurture, like I said, going back to curiosity. My goal for her is just to try to nurture her curiosities, whatever they end up being, to give her the best shot at life. And it's been really an honor to just raise a child, and so I'm having a good time, man. Minus the diapers and the lack of sleep and all that good stuff.
Right.
Doing an interview. Yeah. So, but even that stuff is fun. You know what I mean? So.
Well, you know what though, on that same note, llmind, I want to ask you, you're talking about like not becoming what you were supposed to be, right? How are you going to shape that narrative? Because you are that, right? And you're going to be her father. I mean, you are her father. That's all she will know. How are you going to continue to like nurture that and shape that for her? Because imagine like we had these examples of like, basically you're supposed to go this way and go into this certain box. Now that's all like stripped down for her in your household. How are you going to continue to nurture that when she's seeing something different outside too?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The world is going to be so different when she's a teenager, right?
Yeah.
And with the acceleration of the way the world is moving with technology and connecting on this virtual level, and then post-pandemic world, it's going to be interesting. It's anyone's guess, honestly. But the way I feel is like my wife she's mixed, she's half Black, and then her mom is Syrian, Italian, Ashkenazi Jewish. And so Everest is essentially almost every nationality in one.
That's beautiful.
Which is great. And so, they say, and Jose, I don't know if you've done much research on this, but they say that in the next few decades, a large portion of the world will be, mixed race.
Yeah.
So which I think is a beautiful thing. And you're starting to see cultures melting together, from music to, I'm sure, the film world and the art world and just culture in general, right? You're seeing hip hop fusing with pop music and R&B fusing with country and all this stuff. And so you're starting to see it in real life. And so I don't know what the future holds, but like I said, I think I think at the end of the day, I just want to I do want to I want her to be knowledgeable and to identify with like Filipino culture, and being around my mom and her lolos and lolas, and eating that good Filipino food, and just trying to just give her the best shot. You know what I mean? Give her the best chance in whatever world, whatever the world may look like in the future.
It's beautiful. I want to close out and just ask you guys, start with you, Jose. Who are some storytellers? They don't have to be podcasters, but if they're a podcaster, that's great. But some storytellers you guys check for, excited about.
Well, I've been asked to do a podcast for a while, and I just haven't, just because I'm
need
trying to ask
one.
myself.
You definitely
I
need
just
one.
don't. I think when my book, when Whiteness Not a Country comes out, I think maybe I'll do that. But so I've been listening to a lot of podcasts just because getting inspired, right? So I love, there's a journalist that I love at the LA Times, Jen Yamato. She has a podcast called Asian Enough. Check it out.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Jeff Yang, my friend Jeff Yang, and Phil Yu has a podcast called They Call Us Bruce, is really good. Interestingly enough, there's actually like some of the best or the most interesting sports podcasters are Asian. The mini Kimis show, right? And also ESPN Daily by a Filipino, Pablo Torre.
Yes, Pablo Torre. Right? That's the homie.
Pablo Torre.
That's the homie.
Pablo Torre.
Yep.
And I just got to say, like, again, Barry Jenkins to me is someone to watch. I think the renaissance of filmmakers who are Black is, Steve McQueen. I don't know, llmind, if you saw Small Axe.
Yes,
I mean,
on
that
Amazon.
is like one
Fantastic.
of the, again, Amazon, man. Like, I don't know how you categorize Barry Jenkins and Steve McQueen. The fact
Right.
that Ava DuVernay is basically doing in film what Toni Morrison did for literature is just, to me, astounding. So I think watching all these filmmakers own their own content, create their own narratives, and not be limited by, oh, is it TV? Is it film? Is it what? Really, the question is, what story do we need to tell, and what is the best way to tell that story?
Yeah.
Right. It's
That's
to me
awesome.
really deeply inspiring.
llmind, who are some folks for you? Thank you, Jose.
Man, I'm inspired by a lot of different things and a lot of people. I'm a heavy follower of Seth Godin. I think his view on this, storytelling, honestly, is so fascinating. And then Joe Dispenza is another great mind that I definitely am inspired by a lot. His ideas of like the way the human brain works and how we perceive different things and how we see the world it's so super enlightening, right? So yeah, I think I don't know if I'm answering the question correctly, but there's just there's a lot of different places to draw inspiration. And someone said, I think it was Seth Godin that said best. He said, if you're looking for a mentor, look for a mentor, approach it in a way where you are consuming someone's content as opposed to finding someone who could actually mentor you. Because for every Seth Godin, there's a million people that want him to be their mentor, which is obviously impossible. So the next best thing to do would be to consume his content, listen to the podcast, watch their YouTube videos, read their books, and it really works. It's really powerful. So there's a lot of great content, a lot of great people out there to become inspired by, regardless of what genre you work in or what you do for a living. It's a beautiful thing.
It indeed is. I'm inspired by both of you. llmind, thank you. Jose, thank you. If you want to know more information about Define American, just go to defineamerican.com and listen to llmind's Put the Loop On. It's a music and talk show right here on Spotify, only on Spotify. That concludes this edition of More to the Story. If you're not using Anchor, Anchor is completely free. You can use it to record, edit, distribute, and monetize your podcast. And we need your voices out there. You're going to be able to tear down these narratives that have been pushed down on all of us by getting your own stories out there. So I encourage you to do so. Thank you for hanging with us today. This was the very definition of intersectionality. Everest, your daughter, is the definition of intersectionality. Congrats again. Congrats to your nephew, Jose, and your nieces. I'm really glad I had this time with you guys today. Thank you so much for taking the time to rock with us. Man, I'm inspired. I'm hyped. Check out the Get Up, Spotify's flagship morning show. You can hear my voice each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. I'm going to have you two come through. Like, Jose, I'm definitely going to reach out for you to come through. llmind, you definitely got to come through.
Of course.
Yo, J Period was recently there. We got some other people, Anthony Ramos came through from Hamilton and In the Heights. So we got a lot of people coming through that you guys.
That's my boy.
Bet. Exactly. Like literally, I'm hanging with Ant over the weekend. So that's the homie. So me and you have been like a half degree separation apart for a long time. And Jose, you and the fam now too, sir. So let's continue to build from here. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Peace.